Vicki, 32, ambitious marketing analyst at Meridian Consulting, introduces herself as someone who's always played by the rules. She's built a reputation for thorough research and groundbreaking ideas. But last week, her manager Ryan stole her biggest project yet, a market analysis that could revolutionize their client's business. Little did Ryan know the quiet intern who helped her perfect the report had a direct line to the investors. Before I tell you what happened in that boardroom, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe for more workplace justice stories. I still remember the day I first walked into Meridian Consulting 5 years ago. The Chicago skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our downtown office never fails to remind me how far I've come from my small-town beginnings. Meridian isn't the biggest consulting firm in the city, but we've built a reputation for excellence that attracts prestigious clients across multiple industries. When I started as an entry-level analyst, I was determined to prove myself. Late nights, weekend work, volunteering for the projects nobody wanted. I did it all. My dedication paid off as I gradually moved up the ranks to become one of the firm's respected senior analysts. My colleagues knew me as the person who could transform complex data into actionable insights that clients actually understood. That reputation didn't come easily. For the first 3 years, my boss, Ryan Cooper, seemed to be my biggest champion. He was in his early 40s, polished, and possessed the kind of confidence that commanded attention in any room. Ryan initially took me under his wing, offering guidance on navigating corporate politics and refining my presentation skills. "Vicki, you have raw talent," he told me during my first performance review, "but talent alone doesn't guarantee success. I can help you package that talent in a way that gets noticed." I was grateful for his mentorship, especially since female analysts often struggled to gain the same recognition as their male counterparts. What I didn't realize was how the dynamic would shift once I started gaining attention from upper management on my own merits. The first time Ryan presented my analysis without acknowledging my contribution, I convinced myself it was an oversight. The second time, I rationalized that as my manager, he represented our team's collective work. By the third time, the pattern was undeniable, but I felt trapped in a professional dilemma with no good options. My closest ally at Meridian was Sarah Johnson, another analyst who joined around the same time I did. She witnessed Ryan's gradual transformation from mentor to competitor. "He's threatened by you," Sarah told me over coffee, after a particularly frustrating meeting where Ryan had once again claimed my insights as his own. "Your reports get better client feedback than his. He's using you to maintain his reputation." Then there was Marcus Delgado, our office gossip, who somehow knew everything about everyone. Ryan did the same thing to his previous analyst, Marcus, whispered to me in the break room. "That's why Tanya left for BCG last year. She couldn't take it anymore." I considered taking my concerns to Jennifer from Human Resources, but her reputation for protecting management over staff was well established. The last complaint against a senior manager had resulted in the employee being labeled not a team player and gradually sidelined until they resigned. Despite these challenges, I continued delivering exceptional work, hoping my results would eventually speak for themselves. Then came the Bellwood Pharmaceuticals account. Bellwood was a mid-sized pharmaceutical company with a revolutionary cancer treatment in development. Their early clinical trials showed promising results, but they needed comprehensive market analysis to attract additional investment. With their current funding running low, the stakes couldn't have been higher. During the initial client meeting, Bellwood's CEO made their desperation clear. "We have a treatment that could save thousands of lives, but without proper funding, it may never reach patients. We need your best work on this." Ryan volunteered our team for the project immediately. Meridian will deliver a market analysis that will open every investor's checkbook, he promised confidently. As we left the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Vicki, you're taking point on this. I need your most thorough analysis ever, and I need it in 10 days. The timeline was impossible. A proper analysis of this magnitude typically required a month at minimum. When I tried to negotiate, Ryan shut me down immediately. "This is your chance to prove your value to the firm. Make it happen." For the next week, I barely left the office. My apartment gathered dust as I slept on the office couch and showered in the building's gym. Every night I promised myself I'd leave at a reasonable hour, and every night I found myself still hunched over my computer as the cleaning crew arrived. On the 8th night, around 11:30, I was struggling to refine a particularly complex section on competitor pricing strategies when I noticed someone watching me from the doorway. "You look like you could use some help," said a young man I recognized as one of our new interns. He couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, with dark hair and a quiet confidence that seemed beyond his years. "Adam, right?" I asked, vaguely recalling his introduction during the last company meeting. He nodded and stepped into my office. "Adam Montgomery. I started last week." I smiled tiredly. "No offense, Adam, but this analysis requires specialized knowledge." "I appreciate the offer, though." Instead of leaving, he glanced at my computer screen. "You're comparing elasticity of demand across 3 different therapeutic categories, but you're not accounting for the second-order effects of insurance reimbursement policies." I blinked in surprise. He was right. I'd been so focused on the primary market factors that I'd overlooked a critical pricing variable. "How did you know that?" I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged. "I did my undergraduate thesis on pharmaceutical pricing models. Mind if I take a look at what you're working on?" That night turned into a surprisingly productive collaboration. Adam asked insightful questions that helped clarify my thinking, spotted patterns in the data I had missed, and offered fresh perspectives on market positioning that gave our recommendations more depth. What had seemed like an impossible task gradually transformed into a comprehensive analysis we both felt proud of. As dawn broke over Chicago, we finalized the executive summary that would introduce our 200-page report. "Thanks for your help," I told him sincerely. "I'm not sure I would have finished this without you." He smiled. "It was educational. And fun, actually." As I watched him gather his things to leave, I felt a strange sense of accomplishment mixed with connection. In our overnight work session, I'd seen a potential that reminded me of my own early days at Meridian. I made a mental note to keep an eye on his career progress. What I couldn't have known then was how intertwined our paths would become, and how the report we'd just completed would change everything about my professional journey. The following Monday, I arrived at the office, early, anxious, but excited to present the Bellwood Pharmaceuticals market analysis. After a quick shower and change into the spare outfit I kept in my office, I grabbed the professionally bound report and headed toward the conference room for our 9 o'clock team meeting. As I passed Ryan's office, I heard his voice along with several others I recognized as executive team members. Curious about the unscheduled meeting, I slowed my pace, then froze as I heard my own words being recited. The analysis demonstrates that Bellwood's treatment could capture 30% of the market within 18 months of approval, generating estimated revenues of $400 million in the first year alone. That was the exact phrasing from my executive summary. I stepped closer to the partially open door and saw Ryan standing at the head of his table, my report open in front of him, presenting to 3 senior partners. "Ryan, this is exceptional work," said Patricia Winters, our managing partner. "The depth of analysis here is exactly what we need to impress Montgomery Investments." "I put in some long hours on this one," Ryan replied, accepting the praise without hesitation. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding. Montgomery Investments was one of the largest healthcare investment firms in the country. I had no idea they were involved with Bellwood Pharmaceuticals. Vicki Sarah's urgent whisper startled me. She grabbed my arm and pulled me away from Ryan's office toward the break room. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Once we were alone, she handed me a copy of the meeting agenda for the Bellwood presentation scheduled for Thursday. "You need to see this." I scanned the document, my stomach sinking with each line. The agenda listed Ryan Cooper as the sole presenter of the market analysis. My name appeared nowhere on the document. "He removed all references to your work," Sarah said quietly. "I saw the report on Patricia's desk this morning. The cover page only has Ryan's name as author." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I had spent nearly 2 weeks on that analysis, sacrificing sleep, personal time, and my well-being. And now Ryan was presenting it as entirely his own work. I need to talk to him, I said already, moving toward the door. Sarah caught my arm. Be careful, Vicki. You know how he operates. I waited until the executives left Ryan's office before knocking on his door. He looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Vicki, perfect timing. I was just about to call you. I saw the presentation agenda, I said, cutting straight to the point. My name isn't on it. Ryan's expression didn't change. Bellwood is bringing in Montgomery Investments for this presentation. Lawrence Montgomery himself will be there. And that's why you removed my name from the report I wrote. I pressed. Ryan sighed as if I was being unreasonable. The client specifically requested senior leadership present the findings. This is how business works at this level, Vicki. The content reflects our team's collective effort, but as department head, I represent that team to the client. But you're presenting it as if you did the analysis yourself, I countered. I'll certainly mention your contribution, he said dismissively. But Montgomery Investments doesn't want to hear from a senior analyst. They expect to deal with decision makers. I spent 2 weeks on that report. I deserved at least a co-author credit. Ryan's friendly facade dropped slightly. You're not ready for this level of exposure, Vicki. Trust me, I'm doing what's best for the project and for your career. Don't make this personal. But it was personal. It was my work, my insights, my sleepless nights condensed into that bound document on his desk. Will I at least be in the presentation? I asked already, knowing the answer. I need you back here working on implementation plans, assuming we get the green light, he said. That's where your talents are best utilized right now. I left his office feeling hollow. The careful arguments I had rehearsed in my head dissolved against the wall of corporate hierarchy. Challenging Ryan further could jeopardize my position at Meridian, especially with no documentary evidence that I was the primary author of the report. In the break room, I poured myself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. Rough morning. I turned to find Adam, the intern who had helped me finalize the report. In the fluorescent lighting of day, I noticed details I had missed during our late-night work session. His casual clothes were subtly expensive, the kind of quality that doesn't announce itself but is evident to those who know what to look for. The watch on his wrist was definitely not what most interns could afford. Just office politics, I said, attempting a smile. Something about the Bellwood report, he asked perceptively. I hesitated, then found myself confiding in him. There was something trustworthy about his direct gaze and attentive listening. Ryan's presenting it as his own work. My name isn't even on the cover anymore. Adam frowned. That's not right. We both know how much work you put into that analysis. I raised an eyebrow. Well, I helped a little, but it was 90% you, he said. Has he done this before? That launched a conversation where I found myself detailing Ryan's history of claiming credit. Adam asked surprisingly specific questions about previous incidents. When they happened, who was present, whether there was any documentation. His interest seemed more than casual curiosity. Why are you so interested in Ryan's management style? I finally asked. Adam shrugged. I'm learning about corporate dynamics. Seems important to understand how things really work. Before I could probe further, Ryan appeared in the break room doorway. Adam, just the person I was looking for. I'd like you to join the Bellwood presentation on Thursday. Adam looked surprised. Me? I'm just an intern. You'll take notes and observe, Ryan explained. It's a good learning opportunity. After Ryan left, I turned to Adam in confusion. That's unusual. Interns don't typically attend high-level investor presentations. Adam seemed as puzzled as I was. Maybe he's short-staffed. Maybe I agreed, though. Something felt off about the situation. Later that day, Sarah found me at my desk. I heard the intern is going to the Bellwood presentation instead of you. That's adding insult to injury. Tell me about it, I sighed. I'm trying to decide if it's worth fighting about. Sarah sat on the edge of my desk. Document everything, Vicki. Every email, every conversation, every contribution you made to that report. It might not help now, but someday you might need the paper trail. That night, I followed her advice, compiling a detailed timeline of my work on the Bellwood project. I also prepared additional materials and insights that weren't in the original report, information that only I would have if questions arose during the presentation. As I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. I just had no idea how right I was. Thursday morning arrived with the crisp anticipation of autumn in the air. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not that anyone who mattered would see me today. According to the plan, I would remain at the office while Ryan dazzled Bellwood Pharmaceuticals and Montgomery Investments with my work. At 9:15, Ryan appeared at my desk. Change of plans. You're coming to the presentation after all. What? Why, I asked, caught off guard. Patricia thinks we should have the full team available for technical questions, he explained, though his expression suggested this wasn't his preference. The car leaves in 15 minutes. The drive to Bellwood's headquarters took us through Chicago's prestigious Gold Coast neighborhood. Their offices occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass tower with panoramic views of Lake Michigan. As our elevator climbed to the 35th floor, Ryan turned to me with a last-minute instruction. Remember, I'll handle the presentation. If someone directs a question to you, keep your answer brief and technical. No need to elaborate on methodology or implications. Those are my territory. The message was clear. Stay small, stay quiet. Support if necessary, but don't shine. When the elevator doors opened, I was surprised to see Adam already waiting in the reception area, chatting comfortably with the receptionist, as if he'd been there many times before. How did you get here before us? Ryan asked, obviously confused. Took an earlier car, Adam replied smoothly. Wanted to make sure everything was set up correctly. Ryan seemed annoyed, but quickly masked it as we were escorted into Bellwood's impressive boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Chicago skyline, while a massive mahogany table dominated the center of the room. Bellwood executives occupied one side, while 3 men in impeccably tailored suits sat on the other, presumably the representatives from Montgomery Investments. The central figure among the investors immediately commanded attention. He appeared to be in his early 60s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they landed on. This had to be Lawrence Montgomery himself, the legendary investor whose firm had backed some of the most successful pharmaceutical ventures of the past 2 decades. What struck me as odd was how Montgomery's eyes lit up with recognition when he spotted Adam. For his part, Adam gave a subtle nod in Montgomery's direction before taking a seat at the far end of the table. As the room settled, Bellwood's CEO made introductions around the table. When he reached Adam, he paused. And you are? Adam Montgomery, he replied simply, here to observe. A flash of surprise crossed the faces of several Bellwood executives, and I noticed them exchanging glances. The Montgomery surname connection was evidently not lost on them. Ryan, who had been organizing his presentation materials, suddenly looked up with a shocked expression that he quickly tried to conceal. Once introductions concluded, Ryan took control of the meeting with practiced confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to present Meridian Consulting's comprehensive market analysis for Bellwood's BCL5 cancer treatment. What followed was surreal. Watching Ryan present my work, my research, my conclusions, with absolute conviction. He navigated through the slides I had created, emphasizing key points I had identified, even using some of my exact phrasing from our late-night work sessions. Our analysis indicates that BCL5 could achieve market penetration of 30% within 18 months of FDA approval, Ryan stated, gesturing to my carefully constructed graph. This would translate to approximately $400 million in first-year revenues, with sustained growth projected for the subsequent 5 years. As he continued, I noticed small errors in his explanations, misinterpreted data points, and confused causal relationships that revealed his surface-level understanding of the material. I glanced around the table to see if anyone else caught these mistakes, but the Bellwood executives were nodding along enthusiastically. Lawrence Montgomery, however, was watching Ryan with a slightly furrowed brow. Occasionally, his eyes would shift to Adam, who maintained an unreadable expression throughout the presentation. My stomach churned with a mixture of anger and helplessness. Should I speak up and correct the inaccuracies? Would that help or hurt the client's chances of securing investment? Would it be worth the certain professional backlash from Ryan? After 45 minutes, Ryan wrapped up his presentation with a confident smile. In conclusion, our analysis confirms that Bellwood Pharmaceuticals' BCL5 treatment represents not only a breakthrough medical innovation, but an exceptional investment opportunity, with projected returns significantly above industry averages. A brief silence followed, as Ryan basked in what he clearly expected to be appreciative awe. Then Lawrence Montgomery cleared his throat and turned not to Ryan but to Adam. "Is that everything you found?" he asked quietly. The room went absolutely still. Every eye turned to Adam, who slowly stood up from his seat at the end of the table. "Actually, Father, Vicki and I discovered several additional market opportunities that Mr. Cooper seems to have overlooked in his presentation." Father. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Adam Montgomery wasn't just an intern with the same last name as the investment firm. He was Lawrence Montgomery's son. Ryan's face drained of color. There must be some misunderstanding," he stammered. "Adam is an intern at our firm. He had minimal involvement with this analysis." Adam smiled slightly. "On the contrary, I spent an entire night helping Vicki complete this report when she was facing an impossible deadline. I'm quite familiar with its contents, including several key insights that appear to be missing from your presentation." Lawrence Montgomery's disappointed gaze settled on Ryan. "Mr. Cooper, I make it a practice to thoroughly understand any company before investing significantly. That includes sending my son to observe operations from the inside when possible." It appears he observed quite a lot during his brief time at Meridian. Ryan looked like he might be sick. "Sir, I can explain." "I'm more interested in hearing about these overlooked opportunities," Lawrence interrupted, turning to me. "Vicki, is it? Since you apparently authored this report, perhaps you could enlighten us about what's missing." All eyes in the room turned to me. I felt a moment of pure panic followed by a strange calm. This was my work. I knew it inside and out. The report identifies 3 additional applications for BCL5's underlying mechanism that could open entirely new market segments. I began pulling out the supplementary materials I had prepared just in case. These applications would extend patent protection by up to 7 years and potentially double the projected revenue within a decade. For the next 20 minutes, I presented the complete findings of my analysis, correcting Ryan's misinterpretations and expanding on areas he had glossed over. The Bellwood executives leaned forward with growing excitement as the full potential of their product became clear. Ryan sat frozen in his chair, his earlier confidence replaced by visible dread. Occasionally, he would attempt to interject a comment, only to be silently dismissed by Lawrence Montgomery's raised hand. When I finished, Lawrence nodded thoughtfully. "That's much more in line with what Adam reported finding. Thank you for your thoroughness, Vicki." He turned to Bellwood's CEO. "I believe Montgomery Investments will be prepared to make an offer by the end of next week, assuming we can continue working directly with the actual author of this analysis going forward." The message couldn't have been clearer. Montgomery would invest, but Ryan was not to be part of the process. As the meeting adjourned, Ryan rushed out without speaking to anyone. Adam approached me with a slightly apologetic smile. "My father would like to speak with us privately, if you have time." Looking at the collapsed house of cards that had been Ryan's deception, I realized my professional life had just taken an unexpected turn. With a mixture of vindication and uncertainty, I nodded. "Lead the way," I said. The private conference room where Lawrence Montgomery waited felt like another world from the chaotic energy of the boardroom we'd just left. Through the glass walls, I could see Ryan engaged in what appeared to be a heated phone conversation, gesturing frantically as he paced the hallway. "Please sit," Lawrence said, indicating the chairs across from him. As Adam and I settled in, I noticed the family resemblance between them more clearly, the same observant eyes and deliberate mannerisms. I owe you an explanation, Miss Richmond Lawrence began, and perhaps an apology as well. You sent Adam to spy on Meridian, I stated, pieces falling into place. Lawrence nodded. I prefer to call it due diligence. Before Montgomery Investments commits significant capital to any venture, we like to understand not just the business opportunity, but the character of the people involved. So Adam was never really an intern, I said, turning to the young man beside me. Adam shifted uncomfortably. I am completing my MBA, so the internship wasn't entirely fabricated. But yes, my primary purpose was to observe Meridian's culture and practices from the inside. We've been considering a substantial investment in Bellwood Pharmaceuticals for some time, Lawrence continued. Given the size of the potential commitment, I wanted to ensure their consulting partners operated with integrity. And Ryan failed that test spectacularly, I concluded. Unfortunately, yes. Lawrence's expression hardened slightly. We've encountered this type of behavior before, managers claiming credit for their team's work. It rarely indicates a healthy corporate culture. What my father isn't saying, Adam interjected, is that he was ready to walk away from the deal based on what I reported about Ryan. The only reason we're still considering the investment is because of you. I blinked in surprise. Me? Adam nodded. I told my father about your work ethic, your analytical skills, and your integrity, even when faced with someone taking credit for your work. I apologize for the deception, Lawrence said sincerely. Adam wasn't authorized to reveal his identity or purpose. But I also can't apologize for the outcome. It's important that Bellwood work with consultants who value honesty and give credit where it's due. I was still processing this information when Adam added, I also want to apologize, Vicki. I genuinely enjoyed working with you on the report, and I didn't feel good about keeping my real role a secret. For what it's worth, everything I said about your analysis was my honest opinion. A part of me wanted to be angry about being unwittingly caught in their corporate espionage game, but the larger part recognized that their intervention had exposed a truth that might have otherwise remained hidden. What happens now? I asked. That depends partly on you, Lawrence replied. Montgomery Investments will likely move forward with Bellwood, but we'd prefer to work directly with you as our consulting liaison rather than Mr. Cooper. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a series of urgent messages from Sarah. Office in chaos. Ryan called claiming emergency. Executives in closed-door meeting. What happened? I need to get back to Meridian, I said, standing up. It seems the aftermath has already begun. Adam stood as well. I'll come with you. This situation is partly my doing. I should be there to explain. Lawrence nodded in agreement. I'll contact your managing partner directly to clarify the situation from our end. And Vicki, whatever happens next, I hope you know that your work made a genuine difference today. The ride back to Meridian's offices was tense and mostly silent. Adam attempted small talk a few times, but my mind was racing with potential scenarios awaiting me. Would I be celebrated for saving the relationship with Montgomery Investments, or scapegoated for embarrassing Ryan in front of a major client? When we arrived at Meridian, the reception area was buzzing with unusual energy. Marcus, our office gossip, practically pounced on us as we stepped off the elevator. Vicki, everyone's talking about what happened at Bellwood. Is it true? Ryan got caught stealing your work in front of Montgomery himself? Not now, Marcus, I said, scanning the office for Sarah. I found her waiting by my desk, eyes wide with concern. There you are. The executive team has been in the conference room for over an hour. Patricia asked me twice where you were. What exactly have you heard? I asked. Ryan called in claiming some intern sabotaged the presentation and that you were involved. Somehow, she explained, eyeing Adam suspiciously. Then the receptionist got a call directly from Lawrence Montgomery's office, requesting to speak with Elizabeth Wilson about serious concerns regarding management conduct. Adam stepped forward. I should introduce myself. I'm Adam Montgomery. The situation is a bit more complicated than Ryan portrayed it. Sarah's jaw dropped. Montgomery, as in his son, I confirmed. It's a long story. Before I could explain further, Patricia Winters appeared at my cubicle. Vicki Elizabeth wants to see you immediately. Her eyes narrowed when she noticed Adam. Both of you, actually. Elizabeth Wilson's corner office offered a commanding view of the Chicago River, but the Meridian president wasn't admiring the scenery. She stood behind her desk with a grave expression as we entered, flanked by two other executive committee members I recognized but had rarely interacted with. Miss Richmond, she began formally, I've just had a very interesting conversation with Lawrence Montgomery. My heart pounded as I waited for the axe to fall. He informed me that you are the actual author of the Bellwood analysis, despite Mr. Cooper presenting it as his own work. Her gaze shifted to Adam, and he confirmed that you, Mr. Montgomery, were placed at Meridian specifically to evaluate our firm's practices. That's correct, Adam replied calmly. Elizabeth's expression remained unreadable. Mr. Cooper has provided a different interpretation of events. He claims you deliberately undermined his presentation and that Miss Richmond assisted you in this sabotage. That's absolutely false, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Ryan removed my name from a report I authored and presented it as his own work. Adam simply revealed the truth when his father asked him directly. Elizabeth studied me for a long moment. Lawrence Montgomery has made it clear that Montgomery Investments will only proceed with Bellwood if you personally lead the consulting team going forward. He was quite adamant about that point. I wasn't sure how to respond. Was this a promotion? A test? A trap? Meridian values the Montgomery relationship, Elizabeth continued carefully. At the same time, we need to address this communication breakdown in a way that aligns with our company values. The corporate doublespeak was telling. She wasn't calling it plagiarism or theft of intellectual property, but a communication breakdown. What exactly are those values, Miss Wilson? I asked. Because from where I stand, taking credit for someone else's work shouldn't align with any company's values. One of the other executives shifted uncomfortably, but Elizabeth maintained her composure. We're conducting a full review of the situation, she said diplomatically. In the meantime, I'd like you to prepare to lead the Bellwood account effective immediately. We'll discuss appropriate recognition and compensation adjustments accordingly. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. There was no acknowledgement of the wrong that had been done, no apology for the system that had enabled it, just a pragmatic business decision based on client demands. As we left Elizabeth's office, Adam touched my arm lightly. That went better than it might have, he observed. Did it? I wasn't so sure. That evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Vicki Richmond. My voice sounded tired even to my own ears. Vicki, it's Adam. I hope it's okay that I called. He sounded different outside the office, more relaxed, less formal. How did you get my number? I asked. Intern privileges. Access to the employee directory, he admitted. I wanted to check how you're doing after everything today. I sank onto my couch, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. Honestly, I'm not sure. It's all happening so fast. I understand, he said. For what it's worth, my father was extremely impressed with you. He mentioned that Montgomery might have other projects that could benefit from your analytical approach. Is this another job interview I don't know I'm having? I asked, only half joking. Adam laughed. No, nothing like that. Just possibilities for the future. Doors opening rather than closing. We talked for nearly an hour. Adam explained more about his role at Montgomery Investments and his father's philosophy about identifying not just good investments, but good people. My father built his firm on the principle that character matters more than credentials, Adam explained. He's walked away from profitable deals because he didn't trust the people involved. As our conversation wound down, Adam's tone became more serious. Ryan isn't going to take this lying down, you know. People like that rarely admit fault. They just change tactics. His warning stayed with me as I tried to sleep that night. I had won a battle, but the war for my professional reputation was just beginning. Still, for the first time in years, I felt like I had allies in that fight, even if they had arrived in the most unexpected way possible. When I arrived at the office the next morning, Ryan's door was open, revealing an unusual scene. He was packing items into cardboard boxes while Patricia Winters supervised from the doorway. His normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, his expression a mixture of anger and defeat. Sarah intercepted me before I could process what I was seeing. "They're moving him to the Detroit office," she whispered excitedly. "Effective immediately." "Fired?" I asked, surprised by the swift action. "Not technically. They're calling it a strategic reassignment to oversee some manufacturing accounts." Her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "But everyone knows it's a demotion. Detroit is where careers go to die." I should have felt vindicated watching Ryan pack up his office. Instead, I felt a complicated mixture of relief, guilt, and anxiety about the vacuum his departure would create. "Vicki." The voice belonged to Elizabeth Wilson, who had appeared beside us without warning. "I'd like to see you in my office when you have a moment." Sarah squeezed my arm encouragingly as I followed the company president down the hallway. Elizabeth's office seemed different in the morning light, less intimidating though no less impressive. She gestured for me to sit across from her desk. "I want to address yesterday's situation more directly," she began, folding her hands in front of her. "Meridian has always prided itself on fostering talent and recognizing individual contributions." The corporate script was already evident in her careful phrasing. "With respect, Miss Wilson, that hasn't been my experience," I replied, surprising myself with my candor. Elizabeth's eyebrow arched slightly. "Elaborate, please." Once the dam broke, the words flowed freely. I detailed Ryan's pattern of appropriating work, the lack of recognition, the impossible deadlines, and the culture of silence that discouraged reporting such behavior. When I finished, Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. "I appreciate your honesty, Vicki. It's illuminating to hear this perspective." "Is that why Ryan was reassigned? Because of what I just told you?" "Partially," she admitted, "but also because Lawrence Montgomery made it abundantly clear that Meridian's relationship with his firm depended on addressing what happened. The Bellwood account isn't the only potential business at stake. So it was financial motivation rather than ethical concerns that had prompted action. That explained the speed of the response." Moving forward, Elizabeth continued, "I'd like to offer you a promotion to senior project manager, leading the Bellwood implementation team. This would include a 15% salary increase and direct client relationship responsibilities." The offer was generous on its face, a significant step up the corporate ladder. Yet something in her too smooth delivery suggested an ulterior motive. "Is this promotion contingent on my discretion regarding what happened with Ryan?" I asked directly. Elizabeth's expression remained neutral, but her slight pause confirmed my suspicion. "We prefer to handle personnel matters internally, of course. Professional discretion is always valued at Meridian." Translation: "Take the promotion and keep quiet about how you got it." "I'm interested in the role," I said carefully, "but I also believe Meridian needs to address some systemic issues. If I'm going to lead a team, I need to know they'll receive proper credit for their contributions." Elizabeth studied me with new interest. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A formal attribution policy for all client deliverables," I suggested. "Clear documentation of who contributed what to each project, and regular reviews to ensure compliance." I expected resistance, but Elizabeth surprised me by nodding thoughtfully. "That's actually not unreasonable. Draft something for me to review, and we'll discuss implementation." As I left Elizabeth's office, my phone buzzed with a message from Adam. "Father wants to discuss Bellwood partnership. Lunch today." The restaurant Adam selected was far from Meridian's offices, an elegant place overlooking Millennium Park, where business conversations could happen without concern for eavesdropping colleagues. Lawrence Montgomery was already seated when we arrived, reviewing documents with the focused attention I was beginning to recognize as characteristic. "Vicki, welcome," he said, standing to greet me. "I hear there have been some changes at Meridian since yesterday." News traveled fast in Chicago's business circles. Ryan has been reassigned to the Detroit office, I confirmed. Lawrence nodded unsurprised. Elizabeth Wilson is nothing if not pragmatic. She knows Montgomery Investments has other potential business beyond Bellwood. Over lunch, Lawrence outlined his vision for the partnership between Montgomery Bellwood and Meridian. His plans were more extensive than I had imagined, involving not just the current cancer treatment, but potential expansion into several related therapeutic areas. We're looking at a 5-year relationship minimum, he explained. Possibly longer if all parties perform as expected. Adam, who had been relatively quiet, added, "We're particularly interested in the additional applications you identified for BCL5. The expanded patent protection alone justifies a significantly higher valuation." I was struck by how naturally Adam transitioned between his roles. Sometimes the diligent student, other times the shrewd business analyst. The contrast, with Ryan's one-dimensional corporate persona, couldn't have been more striking. As lunch concluded, Lawrence excused himself for another meeting, leaving Adam and me to finish our coffee. "Your father is quite impressive," I remarked. Adam smiled. "He is. But so are you standing up to Elizabeth Wilson like that. Most people would have just taken the promotion and kept their head down." "How do you know what happened in that meeting?" "Elizabeth called my father immediately after. She wanted to assure him that steps were being taken to address the situation." I shook my head, amused by the corporate damage control. "And now I'm drafting an attribution policy that probably won't change anything fundamentally." "Don't underestimate your influence," Adam countered. "Sometimes small policy changes create space for bigger cultural shifts." Back at Meridian, I found Sarah waiting anxiously by my desk. "Well, are you officially my boss now?" I laughed. "Not yours specifically, but yes, I accepted the promotion." "About time," she said, genuinely pleased for me. "Though I have to say the way it happened was more dramatic than I expected. You're the talk of the office." That became increasingly evident as the day progressed. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged me before suddenly found reasons to stop by my desk. Marcus made at least 3 visits, fishing for insider details about the Montgomery connection, as he called it. Most surprising was a visit from Jennifer, our HR manager. "I heard you're drafting an attribution policy," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Elizabeth asked me to put something together," I confirmed. Jennifer nodded. "I'd be happy to review it before you submit it, to ensure it aligns with existing HR guidelines, of course. Translation to make sure it didn't create liability or admit past failures." "Thanks, Jennifer. I'll keep that in mind." That evening, I began work on the attribution policy, determined to create something with actual teeth rather than a corporate platitude. As I worked, I received a text from Adam. "How's the first day of the new era going the teeth?" His message reminded me that I wasn't navigating these changes alone. For all the complicated circumstances of our meeting, Adam had become an unexpected ally in my professional journey. "Drafting a policy that will probably be edited into oblivion," I replied honestly. "Don't be so sure," came his response. "Change has to start somewhere." The following week brought my first team meeting as project lead. Seated at the head of the conference table, instead of my usual spot along the side, I felt a strange mixture of imposter syndrome and genuine excitement. The team looked to me with varying expressions: curiosity, respect, and in a few cases, thinly veiled skepticism. "As you all know, I'll be leading the Bellwood implementation going forward." I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Before we dive in, I want to establish a core principle for this team. Everyone's contribution will be recognized appropriately. There will be no tolerance for credit stealing or minimizing others' work." A few surprised glances circulated around the table. Such direct acknowledgement of office politics wasn't typical at Meridian. "To that end, we'll be implementing a detailed attribution system for all deliverables," I continued. "Each substantive contribution will be documented, and client materials will reflect these contributions accurately." Sarah caught my eye from across the table and gave me a subtle thumbs up. Other team members showed varying degrees of enthusiasm, but no one voiced opposition, at least not in the meeting. Later that day, I received an email from Adam. Heard your first team meeting went well. Establishing clear expectations from the start is smart leadership. By the way, I'll be joining Montgomery's team for the Bellwood implementation. Looks like we'll be working together officially now. His support bolstered my confidence, but I remained aware that meaningful change would require more than good intentions and a single policy. As I navigated my new role, I began to understand that success wouldn't just be measured by client outcomes, but by whether I could create the supportive environment I had always wished for myself. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. The Bellwood implementation was proceeding ahead of schedule, with promising early results from the first phase. My team had settled into a productive rhythm, and the attribution policy I'd drafted had been officially adopted by Meridian, albeit with some dilution of its strongest provisions. More surprising was how my relationship with Adam had evolved from professional to personal. What began as coffee meetings to discuss project milestones gradually expanded into dinners, weekend outings, and conversations that ranged far beyond business strategies. You seem happier, Sarah observed over lunch one day, more confident. I considered her assessment. I think I am. It's strange how much difference it makes when your work is actually recognized. And having a Montgomery in your corner doesn't hurt, she added with a knowing smile. I couldn't deny Adam's impact on both my professional and personal life. His perspective, shaped by growing up in his father's business empire, but tempered by genuine empathy, offered a refreshing contrast to Meridian's often cutthroat culture. Speaking of Lawrence Montgomery, he had requested a private lunch meeting that afternoon. As I entered the Chicago club where he was waiting, I wondered what prompted this one-on-one discussion without Adam present. Vicki, thank you for making time, Lawrence greeted me standing as I approached the table. I've been following the Bellwood implementation with interest. The preliminary results are encouraging, I confirmed as we settled into our seats. The market response to the Phase 1 trials has exceeded even our optimistic projections. Lawrence nodded. That's part of what I wanted to discuss. But first I'm curious about your experience at Meridian since our intervention. I chose my words carefully. There have been positive changes. The attribution policy is a start, though. Cultural shifts take time. Indeed they do, he agreed. In my 40 years in business, I've found that real change usually requires both policy adjustments and personnel turnover. He paused, taking a sip of water before continuing. Did you know I faced a situation similar to yours early in my career? This surprised me. No, I didn't. Lawrence's eyes took on a distant quality. I was 32 working for an investment bank in New York. I developed a novel analysis model that identified undervalued pharmaceutical companies poised for breakthrough innovations. My age exactly, I realized. My department head presented my model to the executive committee as his own work, Lawrence continued. When I confronted him privately, he told me that's how the game was played. I should be patient and wait my turn. What did you do? I asked, genuinely curious. I left and started Montgomery Investments with my model as our competitive advantage. He smiled slightly. It worked out well in the long run, but those were difficult years. Is that why you're so focused on corporate ethics now? Lawrence nodded. I've seen how toxic leadership destroys value, not just in financial terms, but in human potential. People like your former manager, Ryan, don't just harm individuals. They damage entire organizations by driving away talent and fostering distrust. He leaned forward slightly. Which brings me to my proposition. Montgomery is establishing a new division focused on healthcare innovation investments. We need someone with strong analytical skills and industry knowledge to help identify promising opportunities. You're offering me a job, I stated, taken aback. I'm suggesting a possibility, he corrected gently. Not for today, perhaps, but for you to consider as you think about your longer-term career path. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Lawrence's offer lingered in my mind as I returned to Meridian that afternoon. The prospect of working directly for Montgomery Investments was both exciting and intimidating, a significant departure from the consulting path I'd envisioned for myself. When I mentioned the lunch conversation to Adam that evening, His reaction surprised me. "I had no idea he was going to approach you," he said, seeming genuinely startled. "Though I can't say I'm shocked he sees your potential." "Would it be awkward? Me working for your family's company?" I asked. Adam considered this. "Potentially. But my father is excellent at maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. If he made the offer, he's already thought through those implications." As I pondered Lawrence's proposition, my day-to-day work at Meridian continued. The attribution policy was beginning to show tangible effects. Junior analysts received proper credit for their contributions and collaboration increased, as the fear of having work appropriated diminished. Not everyone appreciated the changes, of course. Some senior managers who had benefited from the previous system found various ways to resist, from malicious compliance to outright sabotage of documentation processes. The most dramatic confrontation came during a meeting with Gregory Palmer, a recently hired executive who had transferred from a competitor firm. When I presented the team's quarterly results, including individual contribution acknowledgments, Gregory's displeasure was evident. "This level of detail about who did what seems unnecessary," he commented dismissively. "The client cares about results, not our internal workflow." Actually, our clients have responded very positively to the transparency I countered. It helps them know exactly who to contact with specific questions. Gregory leaned back in his chair. "In my experience, too much focus on individual contributions undermines team cohesion. We should present a unified front to clients." His argument echoed Ryan's justifications almost word for word. I recognized the underlying message: he wanted the freedom to claim credit for his team's work. "Respectfully, Gregory, that approach is precisely what led to the situation with Bellwood Pharmaceuticals," I responded, holding his gaze steadily. "Meridian's new policy ensures everyone receives appropriate recognition for their work." The room fell silent. Everyone present knew the story of Ryan's downfall, though the official version had been sanitized for corporate consumption. Gregory's expression hardened. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Vicki. As someone relatively new to leadership, you might benefit from some mentoring on executive communication." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. 3 months ago, I might have backed down, intimidated by his senior position, but something had fundamentally changed in my professional self-perception. "I'm always open to mentoring Gregory," I replied calmly. "But Meridian's attribution policy isn't open to negotiation. It was approved by Elizabeth Wilson herself, following the Montgomery investment situation." Invoking both Elizabeth and Montgomery effectively ended the challenge. Gregory retreated, though his expression promised this wouldn't be our last confrontation. Sarah caught up with me after the meeting. "That was impressive," she said, standing up to Gregory in front of everyone. "It felt different this time," I admitted. "Less scary somehow." "Because you know you're right," she suggested. "And because you have backup now." She was right. Between my promotion, the official policy, and the Montgomery connection, I had accumulated enough professional capital to take stands that would have been career suicide before. That realization prompted me to take another step I'd been contemplating for weeks. I arranged a trip to Detroit, ostensibly for a client meeting, but with the real purpose of seeing Ryan at his new position. Meridian's Detroit office occupied 3 floors of a downtown building that had seen better days. The reception area lacked the sleek, sophisticated design of Chicago headquarters, and the overall atmosphere felt muted compared to the energetic buzz I was accustomed to. Ryan's new office was a fraction of the size of his Chicago space, with a view of the neighboring building's brick wall rather than a panoramic cityscape. He looked up from his computer. As I appeared in his doorway, surprise and wariness crossing his face. "Vicki, this is unexpected." "I was in Detroit. For a client meeting," I explained. "The rehearsed lie coming easily. Thought I'd stop by." "Come to survey your handiwork." His tone was bitter, but lacked the confidence that had once intimidated me. I shook my head. "Actually, I came to talk about the Bellwood implementation. There are some aspects of your original client relationship that might be helpful to understand." It wasn't entirely untrue. While I could have sent an email, the face-to-face meeting served multiple purposes. both practical and psychological. Ryan gestured to the chair across from his desk. As we discussed Bellwood's organizational structure and key stakeholders, the conversation gradually shifted to a more professional tone. Ryan's insights, when not obscured by his ego, were actually valuable. As our meeting concluded, I addressed the elephant in the room. For what it's worth, I never intended for things to unfold as they did. Ryan studied me for a moment. But you're not sorry they did? No, I admitted. I'm not sorry the truth came out, but I didn't set out to orchestrate your demotion. He nodded a grudging acknowledgement of this distinction. Word of advice. Vicki, watch your back with Elizabeth. She protected me until I became a liability. She'll do the same to you. The warning stayed with me on the flight back to Chicago. Ryan had been right about one thing. Corporate loyalty extended only as far as financial interests allowed. A week after my Detroit visit, my team received unexpected recognition in an industry publication highlighting the Bellwood project's innovative approach. The article specifically mentioned the attribution system we had implemented, praising it as a model for professional services firms. Elizabeth forwarded the article to the entire company with a brief note. Congratulations to Vicki and her team for exemplifying Meridian's commitment to excellence and innovation. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very system that had been reluctantly adopted following a public embarrassment was now being celebrated as a reflection of the firm's values. Corporate revisionism at its finest. That evening, Adam and I discussed the article over dinner at my apartment. Your father mentioned something similar happening in his career, I told him. How organizations rewrite history to align with their preferred narrative. Adam smiled. He says the best measure of whether change is real is if it survives its originator's departure. Anyone can implement a policy. The test is whether it becomes part of the culture. And how do you make that happen? I asked. By creating systems that reward the right behaviors, and by developing people who will carry the values forward, he replied. Which is exactly what you're doing with your team. As I considered his words, I realized my focus had shifted over the past months. Initially motivated by personal recognition, I now found greater satisfaction in creating opportunities for my team members to be recognized for their contributions. Perhaps that was the most significant transformation of all, from seeking validation to providing it for others. And in that shift, I had discovered a leadership approach that felt both effective and authentic. 1 year after the fateful Bellwood presentation, Meridian hosted a celebration to mark the successful completion of the project's first phase. The pharmaceutical company's treatment had received accelerated FDA approval based on exceptional clinical results, and their stock price had tripled since Montgomery's investment. The event was held in Meridian's largest conference room, transformed for the evening with elegant decorations and catering. Elizabeth Wilson made a point of highlighting my team's contribution to the success story, publicly acknowledging individual team members by name, a practice that had become increasingly common throughout the firm. As I watched my colleagues receive well-deserved recognition, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The attribution policy had expanded beyond my team to become standard practice across Meridian. Several other consulting firms had adopted similar approaches after our system was featured in a Harvard Business Review case study. Yet the most significant change had been my decision finalized just a week earlier to accept Lawrence Montgomery's offer to join the Montgomery Foundation rather than continue climbing Meridian's corporate ladder. The foundation focused on creating ethical business practices initiatives across industries, leveraging the Montgomery family's considerable influence to promote corporate accountability and transparency. My role would involve developing programs specifically targeted at professional services firms like Meridian. Penny for your thoughts, said a familiar voice. Sarah had navigated through the crowd to find me by the windows. Just reflecting on everything that's happened, I replied. It's hard to believe it's been a year. Sarah nodded. And now you're abandoning me to join the Montgomerys. Her tone was teasing, but I detected a hint of genuine sadness beneath. Not abandoning, I corrected. Just taking a different path. Besides, you're getting my position. First female department head under 40 in Meridian's history. Thanks to your recommendation, she acknowledged. I'll do my best to continue what you started. I know you will. My confidence in her was absolute. Sarah had been instrumental in implementing the attribution system, often managing the day-to-day details while I handled the higher-level battles. Later that evening, I found myself in conversation with Elizabeth Wilson. Despite our professional relationship, we had never developed the personal rapport I shared with other colleagues. The Montgomery Foundation is gaining a valuable asset, she said, sipping her champagne, though Meridian is losing one. I appreciate that, I responded. I've learned a great deal here. Elizabeth studied me for a moment. You know, when Lawrence first contacted me about Ryan's misstep, I saw it primarily as a client management problem. I didn't fully appreciate the underlying ethical issue until later. This was as close to an admission of error as I was likely to get from Meridian's president. The attribution policy has actually improved our client relationships, she continued. Clients appreciate knowing exactly who contributed to their projects. It creates accountability. And trust, I added, both internally and externally. Elizabeth nodded. Indeed. Sometimes the right ethical choice is also good business. Not always, but more often than most executives realize. As the evening wound down, I made a point of visiting my old office, soon to be Sarah's, one last time. The space held so many memories, from late nights working on impossible deadlines to celebrations of hard-won client victories. Adam found me there, leaning against the doorframe with a gentle smile. Ready to go. Over the past year, our relationship had deepened beyond either of our expectations. What began as professional collaboration had evolved into a partnership that balanced our different perspectives and strengths. Almost, I said, taking a final look around. Just saying goodbye to this chapter. As we left Meridian's offices, Adam asked, "Do you have any regrets about how things played out with Ryan?" The question made me pause. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty about his demotion. He did something wrong, but the consequences were severe. You didn't cause those consequences, Adam reminded me. You simply stopped hiding the truth. I know. Still, I occasionally think about our conversation in Detroit. He seemed diminished. Adam considered this. My father always distinguishes between revenge and consequences. Revenge is about making yourself feel better by hurting someone who hurt you. Consequences are the natural results of one's actions. And the difference matters. Intent matters, he clarified. You didn't set out to destroy Ryan's career. You just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own choices. His perspective helped resolve a lingering discomfort I'd carried about how events had unfolded. I hadn't orchestrated Ryan's downfall. I had simply stopped being complicit in his deception. The following Monday marked my first day at the Montgomery Foundation. My initial project involved developing a workshop for young professionals about navigating ethical challenges in corporate environments. The irony wasn't lost on me, turning my own difficult experience into guidance for others facing similar situations. During one of these workshops, I met Jessica, a junior analyst at another consulting firm, who described a situation eerily similar to what I had experienced with Ryan. My manager presents my work as his own. In every client meeting, she explained, during our one-on-one consultation. When I mentioned it to HR, they told me that's just how things work at our level. And how does that make you feel? I asked, recognizing my former self in her frustrated expression. Like I'm invisible. Like my work matters, but I don't. I shared a modified version of my own experience, focusing on the constructive steps I had taken rather than the dramatic boardroom revelation. Document everything I advised. Build alliances with colleagues who can verify your contributions. And most importantly, recognize that you have more power than you realize to change the system, not just survive within it. As I guided Jessica through developing a strategy to address her situation, I realized how much my own perspective had evolved. The anger and resentment that once fueled me had transformed into something more constructive, a determination to help others navigate similar challenges without the drama I had experienced. That evening, I shared this insight with Adam during our regular dinner. That's the real test of growth, he observed. Not just overcoming your own challenges, but helping others overcome theirs. His words crystallized a realization that had been forming gradually over the past year. True success wasn't measured by promotions or recognition, but by the impact I could have on others' professional journeys. Looking back on everything that had transpired since that late night working on the Bellwood report with a seemingly ordinary intern, I recognized several essential truths that had reshaped my understanding of professional life. First, integrity matters more than advancement. Short-term gains achieved through dishonesty inevitably crumble, while work built on authentic contribution creates lasting value. Second, allies are essential. My journey would have been vastly different without Sarah's loyalty, Adam's support, and eventually Lawrence's mentorship. No significant change happens in isolation. Third, systems matter as much as individual actions. The attribution policy created structural support for ethical behavior that survived beyond any individual's advocacy. And finally, perhaps most importantly, that success is measured not by what we achieve for ourselves, but by how we help others succeed alongside us. As I continue this new chapter with the Montgomery Foundation, I remain committed to creating workplaces where talent is recognized, contribution is valued, and integrity is rewarded. Because in the end, the most valuable professional legacy isn't an impressive title or salary, but the positive impact we have on the working lives of those who come after us. Have you ever had your work stolen or your contribution minimized? What did you do about it? Share your experience in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. I'd love to hear how you handled similar workplace challenges. Sometimes sharing our stories is the first step toward creating change. Thank you for listening, and remember that your work deserves recognition, no matter where you are in your career journey.